I shook Austin Kruger's hand and felt 7 years die. The conference room applauded. Dennis stood at the head of the table, chest puffed out like he'd won something. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. My name's Neil Richardson. I'm 52 years old, and I just watched my career get handed to a 23-year-old kid who'd been at Ironclad Industrial Solutions exactly 3 months. Congratulations, I said. The word tasted like rust. Austin grinned like he'd earned it. Fresh business degree from Northwestern and a confidence that came from never having to prove anything. He'd spent 3 months watching me handle vendor contracts, manage supply chain logistics for the automotive industry, and troubleshoot equipment failures across 4 states. Now he was my boss. Austin was Dennis's nephew. Everyone knew it. Nobody talked about it. Neil's been invaluable in getting Austin up to speed, Dennis added. Like that made it better. Like 7 years of perfect performance reviews and 60-hour weeks were just elaborate job training for someone else's future. I nodded, happy to help. The meeting ended. People filed out, offering Austin handshakes. I gathered my notepad and pen, moving slower than usual. My mind felt sharp and clear, like when you wake up at 0300 and suddenly understand something that's been bothering you for months. Old Navy habit. I still thought in military time sometimes. Dennis caught my arm as I reached the door. Neil, stick around a minute. We stood alone in the conference room. He loosened his tie and tried to look sympathetic. I know this might come as a surprise, he said, but Austin brings fresh perspectives, new energy. Sure, you understand, right? It's nothing personal. I looked at him for a long moment. Dennis was 52, same as me, soft around the middle with thinning hair he combed over to hide the bald spots. He'd inherited his position when his father-in-law retired. The irony wasn't lost on me. I understand perfectly, I said. He relaxed. Good. I knew you'd be professional about this. That's why you're such a valuable team member. Valuable. Not valuable enough for the promotion I'd earned, but valuable enough to train his nephew and smile about it. I walked back to my desk and sat down. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people solving problems. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen for a full minute. I'd started at Ironclad in March of 2018, right after my divorce finalized. The company handled industrial equipment distribution across the Midwest. Before that, 8 years in the Navy, logistics corps. Learned how to move equipment across the world, solve problems under pressure. The discipline stuck. 5 a.m. gym sessions, black coffee, no sugar, get the job done right. Deployed twice. Saw how a supply chain failure in the Gulf meant Marines went without critical equipment. Learned that logistics isn't just paperwork, it's lives depending on you getting it right. That mentality never left me. Dennis hired me himself. I'd spent 12 years at my previous company before budget cuts eliminated my position. At 45, starting over wasn't easy. We're growing fast, he'd said. Lots of room for advancement for the right people. I became the right people. Worked weekends, stayed late, built relationships with suppliers from Detroit to Indianapolis. Performance reviews were spotless. Your management material, Neil. Just need to be patient. Patient. The Navy taught me that. My daughter Sophia visited every other weekend. She was 16, old enough to notice when her dad looked tired. Sometimes she'd find me at the kitchen table Sunday mornings, laptop open, work emails. Dad, it's the weekend. Just catching up, building something good here. Her mom had remarried a lawyer who worked reasonable hours. I was the dad who worked too much but never missed a school play. Sophia understood that I was trying to build security for both of us, something stable after the chaos of divorce. 6 months ago, Dennis mentioned his nephew might be joining the company. Smart kid, just graduated from Northwestern, business degree. But Austin didn't start at the ground. He started in the office next to Dennis's with the title Operations Specialist. Dennis introduced him around like visiting royalty. Austin's going to observe our processes. Austin observed by sitting in on my client calls, taking notes while I explained vendor negotiations, asking questions that showed he didn't understand the basics. But he was eager, polite. Said yes, sir, and thank you like his mother raised him right. I trained him because that's what you do. You help the new guy. Even when the new guy's last name is Kruger and his uncle signs your paychecks. The moment I knew came 3 weeks ago during a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd stayed late to finish quarterly reports. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew. I was heading to the break room for coffee when I heard voices from Dennis's office. His door was cracked open. Sound carried in that hallway. The board's going to ask questions, Dennis was saying. Austin's only been here 2 months. Another voice, deeper, older. James from corporate. You said Neil was ready for promotion. Neil's solid, but Austin's family. And he's got the degree. The board likes degrees. What about Neil's experience? Dennis laughed. Not mean, but not kind either. Neil's a good worker. Reliable. But he's not executive material. He'll keep doing what he's doing, make good money, and everything works out. I stood in that hallway for 30 seconds, listening to them plan my future. Austin would get Henderson's position. I would train him, support him, and pretend to be grateful. Neil won't cause problems, Dennis continued. He's got a daughter, alimony payments. He needs this job. He'll fall in line. That's when I walked away quietly so they wouldn't hear my footsteps. I went back to my desk, saved my work, and left the building. Drove my F-150 home in complete silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dennis's words. He'll fall in line, like I was a horse being broken to saddle. I thought about Sophia, how proud she'd been when I told her about the possible promotion. My dad's going to be a director, she'd told her friends. Now I'd have to explain why that wasn't happening. I thought about my ex-wife, how she'd always said I was too passive. You let people walk over you, Neil. Stand up for yourself for once. Maybe she'd been right. The next morning, I came to work with a different mindset. I watched Austin more carefully, noticed how Dennis included him in executive meetings while keeping me focused on day-to-day operations, saw how other managers started deferring to Austin on decisions that should have been mine. 2 days after the announcement, I went down to the warehouse to check inventory. Roy Sullivan was there, 58 years old, been with Ironclad for 20 years. He was organizing shipment manifests when I walked in. Heard about the promotion, Roy said without looking up. Austin Kruger, Dennis's nephew. Yeah. Roy finally looked at me. They're doing to you what they did to me 10 years ago, promised me operations manager, gave it to some kid with connections instead. You stayed. Worst mistake I ever made. Roy set down his clipboard. You got time for coffee? We sat in the break room with coffee. The warehouse was quiet. I was 48, Roy said. Been here 10 years. They promised me operations manager. I knew the job inside and out. Trained 3 guys who ended up my supervisors. What happened? District manager's son-in-law needed a job. Fresh MBA. They gave him my promotion. Told me I was too valuable in my current role. Roy laughed without humor. Means you're good enough to do the work, but not good enough to get credit. I stayed because I had a mortgage, 2 kids in college. That was 10 years ago. Roy looked at me directly. Don't be me, Neil. I'm 58 and I've got nothing but a pension and regret. You stay loyal to people who aren't loyal to you. It eats you from the inside. I've got a daughter. Alimony. I had 2 kids. You know what I wish I'd taught them? That self-respect matters more than a steady paycheck. In the Navy, we had a saying, mission first, people always. Dennis forgot the second part. Roy nodded. Men with backbones? That's rare. I stood up. Thanks, Roy. For what? Reminding me who I used to be. The next 3 weeks were clear. I watched Austin struggle with client calls, saw Dennis make excuses, noticed how managers avoided Austin's requests. The kid was drowning. I documented it all. Emails with timestamp errors, client complaints that went unanswered, vendor contracts Austin misread, not out of malice, but because I wanted a record of what happened when competence took a back seat to nepotism. Sitting in that conference room watching Austin accept congratulations, something changed. Not anger, just clarity. Dennis thought I needed this job. The Navy taught me when to advance, when to hold, and when to execute a strategic retreat. I opened my laptop and started typing my resignation letter. My hands were steady. I submitted it at exactly 4:30 p.m. on Friday. Dennis had just returned from walking Austin around the warehouse, showing him his domain. I knocked on his door, handed him the envelope. This is my 2 weeks' notice. Dennis's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, panic. He tore open the envelope and read quickly. Is this a joke? No, sir. You can't be serious. You're leaving because Austin got the promotion? I stayed quiet. Let him fill the silence. Dennis stood up, pacing behind his desk. Neil, let's be reasonable here. You're upset. I get it. But walking away from 7 years, that's not smart. I've made my decision. What about your daughter? Your responsibilities? There it was, the leverage he thought he had. I'll manage. Dennis's tone shifted. Got harder. You realize how this looks, right? Quitting because you didn't get promoted. It's unprofessional, childish. I nodded. I can see how you'd think that. I won't give you a good reference. You understand that? Walking out like this, leaving us hanging. No company's going to want someone who throws tantrums. 7 years of perfect performance, and now I was throwing a tantrum. That's your choice, I said. Dennis sat back down, tried a different approach. Look, Neil, I like you. You're good at what you do. But Austin brings something different to the table. Vision. The board wants innovation, new thinking. Austin represents the future of this company. And what do I represent? Dennis paused. Experience. Stability. Those are valuable too. Valuable enough to train his replacement, but not valuable enough to promote. I appreciate the clarification, I said. Don't do this, Neil. Take the weekend. Think it over. Come back Monday and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. I looked at Dennis for a long moment. He genuinely believed I would back down. I'll finish out my 2 weeks, I said. Train Austin on anything he needs to know. Dennis's face darkened. You'll train him? You think Austin needs training from someone who quits when things don't go his way? He's going to need to understand the vendor contracts, the supply chain logistics, the emergency protocols. I kept my voice level. Unless you plan to figure all that out yourself. That hit home. Dennis knew he didn't understand the technical side of operations. Neither did Austin. Fine, Dennis said. 2 weeks. But don't expect any favors. Don't expect me to help you land somewhere else. You're burning bridges here, Neil. I nodded and turned to leave. Neil, Dennis called after me. You're making a mistake. A big one. I stopped at the door. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I walked back to my desk feeling lighter than I had in months. The office was mostly empty, people heading home for the weekend. Austin was still at his desk, studying organizational charts. I sat down and opened my laptop, started documenting everything Austin would need to know. Vendor contact information, emergency procedures, troubleshooting guides. I created spreadsheets, step-by-step protocols for handling client emergencies, lists of backup suppliers for every major component we sourced, contact numbers for warehouse managers across 4 states. Not because Dennis asked me to, but because the people who depended on our supply chains deserved better than chaos. Truck drivers, warehouse workers, client production managers. They didn't deserve to suffer because Dennis made a bad decision. My phone buzzed. Text from Sophia. Dad, can we get dinner tomorrow? I want to hear about your week. I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. I've got news to share. Good news. News about standing up for myself. About walking away from people who didn't value what I brought to the table. Saturday morning, Sophia showed up at 10 a.m. I made pancakes. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee. She took hers with cream and sugar. I took mine black. The morning sunlight came through the kitchen window. Outside, neighbors were mowing lawns, washing cars, normal Saturday activities. But this Saturday felt different. So what's the big news? She asked. I resigned from Ironclad yesterday. She set down her fork. What? Why? I told her about Austin, about the promotion, about 7 years handed to Dennis's nephew. Dad, I'm so sorry. Don't be. I should have done it weeks ago. Sophia studied me. You seem different, lighter. I feel different. Mom always said you let people walk over you. I never understood until now. You didn't let them this time. No, I didn't. I'm proud of you, Dad. Those 4 words meant more than 7 years of performance reviews. What are you going to do now? I've got interviews lined up. Turns out my client relationships are worth more than I thought. You mean the clients trust you, not the company? Something like that. We finished breakfast and I drove her back to her mom's. Before she got out of the truck, she hugged me. Whatever happens, you made the right choice. I watched her walk to the door. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like the man I used to be. The one who served 8 years in the Navy. The one who knew when to stand his ground and when to walk away. Dennis thought he had all the leverage. He was about to learn otherwise. Monday morning brought revelations. I arrived early as usual and found Austin already at his desk, looking overwhelmed. He had spreadsheets open on 3 monitors, frantically taking notes from vendor emails. "Morning, Austin. How's the transition going?" He looked up, relief flooding his face. "Neil, thank God. I've been here since 6 trying to understand the Grainger Industries account. Their procurement manager is threatening to cancel our contract if we don't resolve some shipping issue by noon." Grainger Industries, our biggest client. They ordered heavy machinery components worth $7 million annually. I'd been managing their account personally for 5 years. What's the issue? Something about delayed titanium brackets from our supplier in Toledo, but I can't figure out which supplier, and their emails are confusing. I looked at Austin's screen. He had Grainger's email open, but he was also looking at supplier contracts that had nothing to do with titanium brackets. He was drowning. I spent the next 3 hours walking Austin through the Grainger relationship, explained how their just-in-time delivery requirements worked, showed him the backup supplier network I'd built over 5 years. "This is incredibly complex," Austin said as we finished resolving the crisis. "How do you keep track of all these moving parts?" "Experience. And good documentation." "Could you show me your documentation system?" That's when I realized something. Dennis hadn't just promoted Austin without preparation. He'd promoted him without understanding what the job actually required. Austin wasn't incompetent. He was completely unprepared for the scope of regional operations. There's a difference. Incompetence is permanent. Unpreparedness can be fixed with time and training, but Dennis didn't have time, and I wasn't going to be there to train him. I spent my lunch break making phone calls to contacts I'd built over the years. Word travels fast in industrial logistics. "Neil," said Trish Grainger, the procurement manager, "I heard rumors about management changes. Please tell me you're still handling our account for the next 2 weeks. After that, Austin Kruger will be your primary contact." Silence. "Kruger. As in Dennis's nephew?" "Neil, that kid called me this morning asking questions that made no sense. I don't have time to train Ironclad's management. If your company can't provide competent service, we'll find someone who can." That conversation repeated itself 4 times with 4 different major clients. By the end of the day, I had a clearer picture of what would happen after I left. Austin would struggle. Clients would get frustrated. Dennis would panic and try to micromanage operations he didn't understand. But that wasn't my problem anymore. By Wednesday, I had 3 job interviews scheduled. My first interview was Thursday morning with Apex Logistics Group, a renewable energy equipment distributor based in Columbus. Their regional manager, Patrick Reynolds, had been trying to recruit me for 2 years. "Neil," Patrick said as we shook hands in his office, "I heard through the grapevine that you might be available. Word travels fast. It does when good people become available, especially people with your client relationships." We sat down. Patrick's office had military memorabilia on the walls. "You served?" he asked. 8 years. Navy, Logistics Corps, Army here. 10 years logistics. Patrick's face changed. Recognition, respect. We talked for 20 minutes about service, transitioning to civilian life, how military logistics prepared us for chaos, how the private sector talks about efficiency, but the military actually practices it under fire. "The corporate world is full of people who talk strategy but can't execute," Patrick said. "You and I, we know how to get things done. We understand accountability. Someone tells you they'll deliver by Euro 600, it better be there at Euro 600. Mission first, people always." "Exactly." Patrick slid a folder across his desk. "VP of Operations. 45% salary increase plus equity stake. We want you to bring your client network. Grainger Industries, Summit Manufacturing, Frontier Equipment, Precision Components. Those relationships are yours, not Ironclad's." I looked at the offer. "Validation. Your reputation in this industry is solid. People trust you. That's worth more than any MBA. I'd need to finish my 2 weeks at Ironclad. Of course. Professional courtesy. Though I suspect they might release you early once they understand the situation." Patrick was right about that. Friday afternoon, Dennis called me into his office again. Austin sat in the corner looking miserable. "I hear you're interviewing with competitors," Dennis said. "I'm exploring opportunities. While you're still employed here, while you're training Austin. That's a conflict of interest." I stayed quiet. "It's also corporate espionage. Your client relationships are proprietary. My client relationships are personal. I built them over 7 years of professional service." Dennis's face was red. "Those clients belong to Ironclad. You take them with you, and we'll sue you for everything you're worth." Austin spoke up from the corner. Uncle Dennis, maybe we should— Shut up, Austin! Dennis didn't take his eyes off me. Neil, you walk out that door and try to steal our clients, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I stood up slowly. Dennis, I've given you 7 years of my life. Perfect performance reviews, 60-hour weeks. I trained your nephew to take the job you promised me. I've been nothing but professional through this entire process. I'm finishing my 2 weeks' notice and moving on to a better opportunity. What happens after that depends on how you handle the transition. Dennis leaned back in his chair. We'll see about that. I walked to the door, then turned back. Austin, if you need help with anything over the next week, just ask. Despite what your uncle thinks, I want you to succeed. Austin nodded, grateful. Dennis glared. I spent my last week at Ironclad documenting everything Austin would need to know. Not because Dennis deserved it, but because Austin was 23 years old and had been thrown into a situation beyond his control. Tuesday of my final week, Austin caught me in the hallway. Neil, can I talk to you? Privately? We walked to the break room. Austin looked exhausted. I didn't ask for this promotion. Uncle Dennis told me it was a done deal, that you were moving to a different position. I didn't know he was lying to both of us. You're in over your head. I know. Every client call is a disaster. I can't sleep. I looked at the, kid. Stressed, overwhelmed, honest enough to admit it. You're not stupid, Austin. You're just unprepared. That's on Dennis, not you. What should I do? Learn everything you can. Take notes. Ask questions. And when this falls apart, don't let it define you. You think it's going to fall apart? I think Dennis set you up to fail so he could prove family loyalty matters more than competence. You're the collateral damage. On my final day, I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to coworkers, and handed Dennis my security badge. This isn't over, Dennis said. For me, it is. I walked out of Ironclad Industrial Solutions feeling lighter than I had in years. The payback came 9 months later. I was settling into my new role at Apex when Patrick called me into his office with a grin. Neil, you need to see this. He slid a business magazine across his desk. The headline read, Ironclad Industrial Hemorrhages Clients, Nepotism Investigation Launched. The article detailed how Ironclad had lost 4 major accounts in 6 months. Grainger Industries, Summit Manufacturing, Frontier Equipment, and Precision Components. Revenue in the Midwest region was down 70%. The board had launched an investigation into management practices. The article quoted an anonymous board member. We discovered a pattern of nepotistic hiring that prioritized family connections over qualifications. This violated company policy and shareholder trust. Dennis Kruger was terminated last week, Patrick said. Board discovered Austin had been hired without proper qualifications. They're calling it a nepotism investigation. I read further. Austin had resigned voluntarily after 3 months of struggling with accounts he couldn't manage. He'd returned to graduate school for supply chain management. Smart move. According to the article, Dennis faced a lawsuit from Grainger Industries for breach of contract after a supply chain failure caused a production delay that cost them $3 million. The failure happened 2 months after I left. Austin had authorized a shipment from an uncertified supplier to save money. The parts were defective. Here's the interesting part, Patrick continued. 3 of their remaining clients have reached out to us, specifically asking if you're available to handle their accounts. 2 months later, I was on a golf course outside Columbus with a potential client. 4th hole, par 3. Heard Ironclad's falling apart, he said. Austin Kruger's gone. Dennis facing lawsuits. Complete mess. I didn't say anything. We've been with Ironclad for 8 years, but our account manager left. Some guy named Neil Richardson. You know him? I'm Neil Richardson. He stopped walking. You're kidding. Joined Apex 9 months ago. VP of Operations. That makes this easy. We've been looking for a reason to switch. Think Apex can handle a $4 million annual account? We can handle it. By the time we shook hands at the clubhouse, I had a new client. No hard sell, no bad-mouthing, just professional competence and personal trust. That's how it works in this industry. People follow people, not companies. A year after I left Ironclad, I was driving through Toledo on business. Stopped for lunch at a diner near the industrial district. Austin Kruger was sitting alone in a corner booth reading a textbook. He looked up when I approached. "Neil, what are you doing here?" "Business trip. Mind if I sit?" He gestured to the empty seat. Austin looked older, more serious. The textbook was Industrial Supply Chain Management. Back in school, master's program at Ohio State, supply chain focus. He smiled. Figured I should actually learn what I was supposed to be doing. "That's smart. I wanted to thank you for how you handled everything. You could have hung me out to dry, but you didn't. You were in an impossible situation. Uncle Dennis still blames you for everything. Says you sabotaged the company." I sipped my coffee. "What do you think?" Austin closed his textbook. "I think I was 23 years old with a business degree and no real-world experience. I think Uncle Dennis gave me a job I wasn't qualified for because I was family. And I think you spent 7 years earning a promotion that should have been yours." We sat quietly for a moment. "I'm sorry about how everything went down," Austin said. "You deserve better. We both did. But sometimes things work out the way they're supposed to." Austin nodded. "I heard you're doing well at Apex." "I am. And you'll do well too, once you're ready." I paid for both our lunches and shook Austin's hand before leaving. He was a good kid who'd been used as a pawn in his uncle's game. 6 months later, Dennis Kruger filed for bankruptcy after losing his wrongful termination lawsuit against Ironclad's board of directors. The local business section ran a brief article. His wife had filed for divorce. The house was in foreclosure. I felt no satisfaction reading it, just a quiet confirmation that actions have consequences. Austin graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at a logistics company in Cincinnati. He spent 2 years learning the business from the ground up before earning his first promotion. He sent me a LinkedIn message when it happened, starting at the bottom this time, doing it right. "Thanks for the lesson. I'm 54 now. VP of Operations at Apex Logistics Group. We've grown the Midwest division by 40% in 2 years. My equity stake is worth more than 7 years at Ironclad ever would have been." Patrick promoted me to Senior VP last month. Roy Sullivan retired with a full pension, but I hired him as a consultant to train our warehouse team. Sophia's starting college next fall, engineering program at Purdue. "You showed me that standing up for yourself isn't the same as giving up," she said during Sunday breakfast. "You built something better, Dad. That's what I want to do." She's right. I built something better. Not just a career, but a life where my work is valued, where loyalty runs both ways. Last Sunday she asked me about the divorce, about her mom. We'd never really talked about it before. "Did you love her?" she asked. "Very much. Still do, in a way. Just not in the way a marriage needs. Do you regret it? The divorce?" I thought about that. I regret that it hurt you. I don't regret that it led me here. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us open doors we never knew existed. She nodded, processing. "Uncle Dennis thought losing your job would break you. Dennis thought a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. I'm glad you left, Dad, even if it was scary. You're happier now. I can tell." She was right. I am happier. Not because Dennis failed, not because I succeeded, but because I finally understood something the Navy tried to teach me years ago. You can't control what other people do. You can only control how you respond. Last month, I spoke at an industry conference about supply chain optimization. Afterward, a young professional approached me. "Mr. Richardson, I've been at my company 3 years. They keep promising advancement, but I keep getting passed over for people with connections. What would you do?" I thought about 7 years at Ironclad, about Dennis's empty promises, about Roy's warning. I'd ask myself 3 questions. First, are they investing in your growth or just using your labor? Second, do you have relationships outside this company that value your work? Third, can you look yourself in the mirror and feel good about staying? And if the answers are no, yes, and no, then you already know what to do. You're just looking for permission. He nodded. Thanks. I watched him walk away and thought about Neil Richardson at 45, starting over. That man was patient, loyal, willing to wait his turn. I'm glad I'm not him anymore. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the people who wronged you. It's building a life so good that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. It's teaching your daughter that self-respect isn't negotiable. It's becoming the kind of leader you wish you'd had. Dennis Kruger thought he was punishing me when he promoted Austin. Thought I needed ironclad more than ironclad needed me. Thought 7 years of loyalty meant I'd accept anything to keep my paycheck. He was wrong about a lot of things. I'm 54 years old, senior VP at a growing company, equity partner, respected in my industry. My daughter's proud of me. I sleep well at night. And every morning I wake up at 5 a.m. for the gym. Old Navy habit. The discipline stuck. Some people might say I got lucky, that Patrick Reynolds happened to be hiring at the right time, that my clients happened to be loyal. But luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I spent 7 years building relationships, learning every aspect of the business, earning trust one transaction at a time. When the opportunity came to walk away, I was prepared. That's not revenge. That's not luck. That's just living well.